times I'm going to punch him out. This is my mom.
I would pay to see that.
I'm waiting for this, for trespassing on the Capitol grounds. I'm going to punch him out, and I'm going to go to jail, and I'm going to be happy.
I'm going to punch him out, I'm going to go to jail, and I'm going to be happy. The sentiment of millions and millions of people around the world when it comes to Donald Trump. That's Nancy Pelosi, of course. New sound we heard from the January 6th hearings yesterday. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. Thank you very much for joining me on the show today. I've got my interview with Ophira Eisenberg because Christian couldn't join us, so it was just Ophira and I, and it was great. It was really great. We talked about our new parenting podcast. I think you're going to love it. And though Christian Finnegan couldn't join that conversation as he normally does, he does make today's podcast because longtime listener Matt Carlson reached out a few weeks back and said, I would love to interview Christian Finnegan about music. And that's certainly not something I can do. As I've told you, I can't really talk about music. I just love to listen to it. But Christian agreed. Matt Carlson and Christian Finnegan sat down and talked about Christian's newsletter, New Music for Olds, and had a great conversation about music that I thoroughly enjoyed listening to myself, and I hope you will as well. So that is also on today's episode of Stand Up. But first, last night was a lot of fun with listeners. We hung out for about 3 hours, and I did try to tape today's show opening in front of everybody and including everybody, but it was just an editing nightmare because there was a lot of mics open, and then when one listener, Heather, who was brilliant, and she talked, and I could barely hear her, and so it's a hell of an edit, and it's hard to fix, and it would take way too much time, and it just didn't sound good enough. So unfortunately, I couldn't include that, but we had a great conversation and an awesome hangout. Loved being there and doing it, but it would be hard to, I think, listen to here on the podcast. Although I did get Brady's son, Artie, to introduce me on the show. I asked for someone to do the intro, and Artie stepped up. He didn't quite get the name of the show right, but I still really loved it. Here is that from last night.
Stand Up with Pete Dominic.
Stay up with Pete Dominic.
That's right, Artie. Stay up with Pete Dominic. I very much appreciate that. You got to stay up, folks. You don't want to get down. There's a lot of different ways to look at that. Great advice, Artie. Thank you very much, young man. And great to have your dad, Brady, supporting us and listening and being there with us last night, and so many other folks, friends. We had a great hangout last night. The first hour was contentious and passionate. We were arguing about media and politics, but it was great and respectful. And then we moved into some ridiculousness for the second 2 hours and had a lot of laughs. And well, that's why I'm late, as I normally am on Friday, because I hung out for like 3 hours. We'd love to have you there. Join us. Go to standupwithpete.com. Become a paid subscriber. The show is free, but it isn't cheap. It's paid for by stand-up subscribers. If you aren't one, give it a shot. Go to standupwithpete.com for as little as $5, and you can join us and get all of the benefits that our community brings. Okay, well, let's just get to a few clips I grabbed for you this morning, and then we'll get to my conversation with Ophira Eisenberg. Obviously, today, if you're listening on Friday, pretty much every media outlet that deals with politics is talking about the January 6th hearings, as they should. Huge story yesterday. I'm going to skip it as a result of all the great insights you're getting today, and I frankly didn't get to watch it all. Yesterday was a super busy day, and I couldn't watch it live, unfortunately, because I love doing that with Noel Kasler and Jay Black, but I caught up with it later. But still, instead of covering that, just a few clips from other things that you might not have heard about. First of all, there were debates in both Michigan, a gubernatorial debate, and then in Wisconsin, there was a Senate debate. So I grabbed one clip from the Michigan debate between the incumbent Democrat Gretchen Whitmer and the challenger Tudor Nixon, of course, a Republican there. And I thought this was really smart. I wish that more Democrats would message like this. And here she is, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, at the debate last night.
The same month as the Oxford school shooting, where 4 children were murdered, 8 were injured, and the community was terrorized, Tudor Dixon posted on her social media a picture of her shooting a gun with the caption that said, "Gun control means using both hands. She is too dangerous and too out of touch to be trusted with protecting our kids. She'll put the Second Amendment before second graders every time. We cannot let that happen."
Yeah, Gretchen Whitmer last night in Michigan. The only thing I took a little issue with is she says she put the Second Amendment before kids. It's not, the Second Amendment does not say what so many of them interpret it to say. We've talked about that so often here on the show, so I guess I quibble with that a little bit. But powerful messaging from the governor of Michigan. Come on, Michiganders. Is she going to win? What else needs to be done? Get out there and support Democrats in Michigan, or you're going to have a MAGA, Trump-loving Republican in office there. So do everything you can and let us know how we can help. Let's head over to another place that needs help. It's Wisconsin, where last night the candidates were asked at the end of the debate what they find admirable about each other. It was Senator Ron Johnson, of course, who probably most of us have heard. He is a conspiracy theorist, a racist, and a giant asshole. And as Mehdi Hassan tweeted about the clip you're about to hear, he says, "I've said it before and I will say it again. The big divide in our politics is more than left versus right. It's between awful people and not awful people. And now here it is."
Mr. Barnes, you go first. What do you find admirable about your opponent?
Well, no, seriously. I do think, the senator is proven to be a family man, and I think that's admirable. That's absolutely to be respected. He speaks about his family. He's done a lot to provide for them. I absolutely respect that.
Mr. Johnson.
Likewise, I appreciate the fact that Lieutenant Governor Barnes had loving parents, a school teacher, father worked third shift, so he had good upbringing. I guess what puzzles me about that is with that upbringing, why is he turned against America? Why does he find the founding of America awful?
Somehow
it puzzles
we
me.
Did not.
I said we said something admirable.
I said he had nice parents. That's not admirable. I hate that question anyway. I really don't like it. You're in this brutal campaign and you're doing everything you can to be critical of your opponent, and often it gets very ugly most of the time these days, and it certainly has in Wisconsin. It hasn't been an equal amount of ugliness. As a matter of fact, Mandela Barnes seems like a really, really nice guy, and it would be shocking to see him lose this Senate race, although it looks like he's down in the polls. And it's just, what is going on in Wisconsin, folks? What is it about Wisconsin? Again, Mehdi Hassan, it's between awful people and not awful people. I have a hard time. I wish I could have more nuance, but it does seem that, put it this way. Broken people, are they broken? Let me know what you think. There was a lot more highlights in that debate last night as well, of course. All right, I do have one clip related to January 6th. I did find Jamie Raskin was on TV on MSNBC after the hearings last night, and there were two big takeaways that I'm reading from yesterday's hearings that are somewhat new, I guess, in that the Secret Service knew and other agencies knew that they were plotting and planning to come and be violent, and they didn't do anything, or certainly not enough, clearly, to prevent them. I have a lot to say about that. I'll be talking with plenty of guests about it in the next few days. But the other big news was that the January 6th hearing was going to, in fact, subpoena Donald Trump to testify in front of them. However, nobody seems to think that he would show up. I guess he said he would come if it were live, but he wouldn't do it on tape like pretty much everybody else has. Anyway, here it is. Congressman, constitutional scholar, January 6th committee hearing member, and hair model, Jamie Raskin on MSNBC last night.
What kind of snowflake is Donald Trump that he's willing to send hundreds and hundreds of other people to go and do his battle and to attack police officers with Trump flags and Confederate battle flags and turn American flags into weapons? And he's very happy to do that, and he won't even come and explain himself why he thought he had a right to do that or why he thought that was the right thing to do. What is he afraid of? One thing he might be afraid of course, is that under the Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination, the Supreme Court has determined that in a criminal trial, the prosecutors cannot comment on someone's failure to testify, much less draw an adverse inference from it. You can't even mention it, and that's grounds for mistrial. But in a civil proceeding, the Supreme Court has found unanimously, and this is Justice Scalia's big commitment. He was the one always writing these decisions. He said, if you don't show up for a civil proceeding, it's perfectly fine for that not only to be mentioned and talked about, but used against you and to be the basis for drawing an adverse inference. So if Donald Trump wants the entire country to draw the most negative adverse inferences from his not showing up, well, he's free to do that. But at that point, also the committee can say if there are any remaining gaps or conflicts or ambiguities in the testimony, we're going to resolve it against him because, as Scalia would say, he has every incentive and motivation to show up. And if he doesn't do so, he's basically confessing. And you can say that in the civil context, whereas you could never say it in the criminal context.
Well, that explains a lot, which is why I wanted to throw it on there. At least that's his interpretation. He is, of course, a constitutional law scholar and a super intelligent and very articulate fella. So I wanted to give you some insight, his insight on that whole issue and where we go from here. In other news, Russia announced Thursday it's evacuating civilians from the occupied Kherson region in southern Ukraine at the request of the Russian-installed leader there. So that's a pretty big headline. Also, did you see that video? Bill B shared this of they were doing some kind of troop exercises or drills or something where they were all standing at attention, and then this armored vehicle just drives through and rolls over a guy. just hit him. Really, really terrible. And just another example of how inept they are at even apparently driving their vehicles. The Supreme Court denied a Trump request on the Mar-a-Lago documents, which is a pretty big story because a lot of people, we think the Supreme Court is pretty much in the tank for conservative causes and Donald Trump, but they aren't always. And that's an important point. They completely rejected his request to let the special master review classified documents that federal agents seized from his house. And that story obviously continues to develop. Where are you on the death penalty? I'm against it for every case, in all cases, even and including the case in the Parkland shooter. But I understand a lot of the victims' families are not. The shooter avoided the death penalty yesterday when a South Florida jury recommended that he be spared and serve life in prison without the possibility of parole for shooting and killing 17 people. He confessed, he pleaded guilty to it, but some of the victims' relatives in the courtroom were really, really upset, and it's obviously a divisive issue around this country and everywhere else. North Korea is flying warplanes near the border, tested a missile. The New York Attorney General asked a court to freeze Trump's assets. Some justice, folks, some justice. Social Security recipients are going to get an 8.7% boost to match inflation, which I think is huge news that'll probably go undercovered. And a surprise turnaround on Wall Street, if anybody cares. Dow futures jumped 300 points as stocks tried to build on yesterday's historic turnaround this morning, Friday morning, if you're listening or care at all about that. But now it's time to get to my first guest. Like I said, coming up, a pretty cool thing. Listener Matt Carlson reaching out and asking to interview Christian Finnegan to talk about and definitely promote his newsletter, New Music for Olds. I loved that conversation. I think you will as well. It's not a conversation I can host. Matt wanted to do it. It was his idea, and I'm very excited for you to hear that. But first, I've got the host of Parenting is a Joke, a brand new podcast from iHeartRadio. She joins me almost every Friday here on Stand Up, a very good friend of mine, a hilarious comedian, storyteller, writer, and we talked about her new podcast. We talked parenting. I shared one of the issues I was dealing with this week, and I think you're really going to love this. Ophira is, of course, on social media at Ophira E on Twitter and Instagram. And so let's do it.
Ophira Eisenberg, back from Vegas. And what do you want to say about the listeners that came out to your show? Specifically, Cassie and her brood came to your show in Vegas.
Okay. Can I just say, first of all, Cassie did not come to my show. Oh. Cassie brought 8 people with her. Cassie brought a significant part of the audience with her to my show in Vegas. And then I believe her son and girlfriend returned the next night because the girlfriend wasn't there. I know. So that was amazing. Well, and she was so nice, and even invited me to her house because she knew that, the hotel, staying in a casino can be like not the most pleasant environment. If you're not a gambler.
I wanted at some point to interrupt you and say about Cassie, not a good person, because she's like the nicest person in the world. So I felt like that's the funniest thing to say, is just to trash her.
So nice. So nice, so welcoming. And we were going to try to go hiking. I had 2 days left in Vegas, and it just ended up being timing because one of them I had to kind of work. And the second day she was like, we can go in the afternoon. But I was like, I'm scared to go hiking in the afternoon because guess what the temperatures are in Nevada?
Unbearable.
Which everyone else, I was like, it's 95. And they were like, perfect hiking weather. And I was like, oh, I I don't understand how you guys work.
It was that hot in October in Vegas. Still that hot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was screaming hot. So it was very uncomfortable, actually, to be outside, even when I was just walking down long stretches of highway in Vegas, trying to connect myself from one strip mall to a different casino.
How was the... I don't even know. I have such a... I want to say, how was your trip back? Because you got to leave Vegas. No offense to Cassie and Sheila and other Vegas listeners, but didn't you... you did a weird thing that people don't do in Vegas, which was what?
So, I wanted to write. I wanted to do some writing. I feel like when I'm in New York, I have a lot of limits and boundaries on my time. Small child. There are just times you have to do things. There's a lot of things coming at you. But then if all of a sudden the world was removed and I couldn't sit in the hotel room and write, I just found it stifling because there's no air. It's just I couldn't do it. So I was Googling cafes to write at Vegas. A few came up and nothing was a walk. Everything had to be an Uber. But I ended up taking a 25-minute or so, therefore $25 Uber ride to a bookstore in downtown Vegas, the most wonderful bookstore in the world. Shout out to the Writer's Block. It was beautifully put together. So, those bookstores that you go to and you just want to buy everything. You're like, I don't even really read poetry, but I'm buying 9 volumes.
It's interesting you say that because I have a theory about that. It's so weird to hear you say that because I have a strong theory about that. The name of the bookstore is The Writer's Block?
Yeah, good one, right?
My theory is when I walk into a bookstore or a library, I have something comes over me, and it's actually why I decorate my house with books. Granted, I've been getting free books for years and years hosting a show, and I want to know what's in all the books. I have that feeling. I just want to know all that. And I think that's a pretty normal thing. And I think it's about curiosity, about loving to learn, I guess. What do you think? Is that as similar? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. And at different points, I think that I was so starved for I'm shitting on Vegas, but I was so starved for intellectual culture while in Vegas. I was just I got to read philosophy. I'm going to maybe Kant. This is a good time for Kant. I don't know. I was just that's what I was really drawn to poetry, philosophy. I'll tell you one book that I was not reading that. And it was, shout out to whoever did this book. I applaud you for doing it. I'm just not in the mood. It was how the pandemic will change our kids. I was don't need to know. Don't want to know.
That's interesting. Well, that leads us to your new podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Ophira has a brand new podcast with iHeartRadio. It's a big deal. It's a big company. And it's called Parenting is a Joke. And you know what? I just want to play the trailer for people. It's about a minute long, and I think it's really funny and great. Is that weird to do?
It's very flattering. I mean, I won't look.
Here we go.
Hey, I'm Ophira Eisenberg. I tell jokes late at night. When I was pregnant, I was considered both high risk and an inspiration. And wake up in the morning with a small child. No singing right now. It's absurd. I used to be a chick. You might know me as the host of NPR's Ask Me Another, but I have a brand new podcast. From iHeart Podcasts and Pretty Good Friends, it's called Parenting is a Joke. Each week, I talk to your favorite comedians about their careers and what it's like to have a kid thrown in the mix, like comedy writer Jesse Klein, who gives us a heads up.
People should know that squirrel head and golf ball sized blood clots are going to drop out of their bodies.
And Roy Wood Jr.'s son is a jet setter.
My son is 6 years old, and he's a Delta Sky Miles gold medallion. My son gets 2 free check bags, and I'm not even lying to you.
Plus, Chris Gethard embraces his new reality.
I was so cool 5 years ago. I had my own TV show. I had Subway posters with my face, and now I'm picking a bobby pin out of another human being's turds so I don't fuck up my septic.
Parenting is a Joke launches October 18th, so grab a cheese stick and listen on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
That's a great song, by the way.
Thank you. So, Adira Amram, are you familiar with Adira Amram?
Mm-mm.
She's like a obviously musician and singer and comedian. She does like very funny, wild songs. And so I asked her if she wanted the job of doing that.
It's great. Parenting is a joke. And already 3 great guests that we know are on the show. But I have one criticism of the trailer, your voiceover. I did feel like you were smiling the whole time. That's what you do when you're doing a promo or trailer. That's what we're kind of like. You really are selling it, and you sounded like parenting is a joke. And I was like, I think she's smiling. I'm smiling.
Oh yeah. Because you know what? You know this from listening to your voice all the time. And I know this from listening to my voice all the time. Sometimes I hear my voice and I go, no, I was in a perfectly good, that was a chipper, fun moment. But my voice sounds serious and kind of, I don't know, like pointed. And yeah, so I feel like I have to smile. So people are like, oh, she seems okay.
You can do nothing but that voice over on a promo, because if you sounded miserable, unless it was purposely for a joke. But anyway, go to parentingisajokepod.com.
Yeah, but it is Parenting is a Joke on the Instagram.
Oh, okay. And follow on all the social medias because you love Ophira. And it's going to drop, once a week?
Once a week, starting next Tuesday.
Very cool. Let's talk about parenting.
Oh, my God. Okay. I will just tell you that this morning, my son, he's 6, he's had glasses for 25 days because did he inherit my perfect eyes? No, he did not, Pete. He inherited his father's shitty eyes. Okay. So he needs glasses. So we got him glasses and made a big deal out of it. Like, don't lose the glasses. Guess what was not in his bag this morning?
Yeah, I have nothing but sympathy for both your son and your husband. First of all, for someone to blame any bad quality on their partner, it's such a mean, horrible thing to do, because he already feels bad. Like, he feels bad that this son's vision is bad. And then you're like, yeah, it's got to be your fault because my vision is good. And this child is, I'm 46. I lose glasses all the time. There's a lot, but they must be expensive. So at least they are.
Yeah, it is sort of like losing 2 of my own $100 bills.
You should make it his life harder, because now he's the kid with glasses. So attach a giant Apple tag to them, a microchip.
How about a restroom key from like a doctor's office? Can I put that on the glasses?
Gas station restroom key. You'll never lose these now. Yeah, I also can't carry them. My head and neck are killing me.
There's a sewing machine attached to it.
All right, I can top that easily, though. I can top. Wait, were you done?
Well, I did get a little crazy angry about it. It was probably unfair, but I was like, you're going to have to pay for the replacement. And then I said that to my son and he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, you have to pay for it. And then my husband goes, that is too harsh, Ophira. Like, what? You're going to take his $33 from the Tooth Fairy?
He has a bank account?
Like, yeah. He's got $33 from the Tooth Fairy.
My wife does the same thing. I think that's, yeah. Julia just called home. She's like, I'm starving. I got to be here till my game starts. She's a freshman, of course, a little older than your son. And she goes, can I order food? They do this now. They order food to be delivered to school. You can order anything, obviously. And I go, yeah. You know what? Talk to mom, because she might. And Val's like, yeah, you're going to have to, you should have been more prepared. You have to pay for them. Like, it's food. I think we should cover food, but we often don't see eye to eye on money stuff and responsibility about things, which is why my story is, I'm going to throw Julia under the bus. She calls me 2 days ago. This is really bad. She called me a couple days ago and said, can you come get me? It was after school. Can you bring me home? I was like, sure. And it's about 15 minutes to get over there, 10 to 15 minutes. I showed up and I called her and I was like, I'm here. Where are you? You're not up front of the school. And she's like, oh my God. What? She goes, I got a ride. Are you joking?
Did she forget you were coming?
Yeah. She had just called me.
She just called me to come get her.
Oh,
and then
did she get a ride with someone she is trying? Was it with someone she likes? Was that someone she's trying to impress?
I don't think so. There was somebody else that was coming our way. She's like, I'm going to get in the car.
Forgetting that she could use her phone to let you know that?
You're trying to understand it the way I am. So luckily,
I did this. Okay, but go ahead.
Tell me what you did. What do you mean you did this? No one's no. Hold on. No one's ever done this. Nobody's ever. Let me just be clear. I haven't called a taxi or a cab and then figured out a different way. If I did that, I would call them back. I'm like, don't worry about it. Don't waste your time. And that would be a stranger, because I would think the right thing to do is I called this car service. Let me cancel it.
I remember specifically calling. Now, I didn't have a cell phone, obviously. Calling home, getting my older sister, and asking her to pick me up from, it wasn't school, but it was right after school, like a little thing. And then, I don't know, I thought she was taking a while, and someone else was like, I'm going right by there. Do you want to come? And I think I had a thing where I was too afraid to ever say no to someone. And I was just like, okay. And then they drove me home, like I think it was my friend's mom or whatever. And then my sister, of course, was waiting for me, and I never showed up. And she also didn't have a cell phone to figure out. So there used to be a rule that if you waited for someone, I don't know, it was like 15 minutes, that was it. You're out. And so she came home and I was there, and she lost her mind on me. I still feel the shame from that day.
So
I still feel ashamed.
Yeah, first of all, it's not a fair comparison. And let's talk about the difference between our lives growing up and our kids' lives growing up. I think it's the most important parenting issue, because I would argue that no generation of parents has ever had it as, I don't want to say as hard, but as confusing as we have in terms of what to do, what works. And there's like not a lot of research, and the research isn't great. You know about this in terms of screen time and what, a lot of things are counterintuitive. You think this is going to be good and it's bad. And just, we have no idea what to do with the fact that our children have phones and the internet. And your example is not great because there's no phones. There's nothing and my daughter could have just called me at any point.
And that is pretty funny. I mean, I sort of like knowing that kind of whatever I did, it had nothing to do with technology, that it just exists. Stupid decisions by teenagers exist through time. That's what I took out of it.
Well,
you could have technology, no technology. She could have a chip in her brain where she could blink twice and send you a message.
My question to you and listeners is, what would you do? How would you handle that when you got home? And what I did was, when I was on the phone, I was like, are you joking? She's like, no. And I go, basically, I said, stay there. Don't go anywhere, because we're going to have to talk about this. I get home. Val's there. She sees the whole thing. I decided, because my rage and anger subsided, which has always been a problem for me. I'm glad I had the 10 minutes or 12 minutes back to think about how I was going to handle it. And I basically went with guilt or vulnerability. However, I just said, listen, I love to see you. I love to be with you. I'm happy to come get you. Always. I almost always drop whatever I'm doing and come get you. And the fact that you just didn't call me, and it made me feel like you don't care about like me. I know you love me. I know you care about me, but like, you didn't care about my time. You just took me for granted. I go, I got to be honest with you. I'm really hurt by it. And I'm disappointed that you did that. And I basically left it there. Val texts me a little while later. She goes, it was one of your better parenting performances of all time. You went with vulnerability. I was like, thank you. And a Jewish friend of mine said, you went with Jewish guilt. I was like, fine. Any of it's better than rage and, I don't know, punishment or consequences. It just doesn't, I don't think those necessarily work. It's not, I want to do what works to make her not do a thing.
Did she cry? Did she cry?
After I hit her.
Okay, well.
No, she didn't. She didn't. I don't know how she felt. I honestly, she's tough to read sometimes, but what would you have done?
I mean, what you did was totally bad.
You would have made him pay for the gas.
Yeah. No, I would have been like, never call me again. Never call me again.
For anything.
I don't care what you need. Never call me again. You had one chance. There are no second chances. I'm sorry. No second chances.
Yeah, it was tough. I didn't know what to do. I'd love to know what people think, what you would have done in that situation.
You did is amazing. that was like, that's the kind of thing that you would read in a book about how you're supposed to react. And yet in the moment you would be like, I remember that book said that thing, and you would not be able to access it. But you had the presence of mind to put it together. I applaud you.
Well, it's partly the meditation and my new spiritual work of trying to think about how I'm going to react to things. And it's partly, frankly, I had 10 minutes. I had 10 minutes to calm down and decide what a good strategy was, as opposed to had she just pulled in and I started, losing my mind on her, which is a pretty normal thing for me.
Well, should I take my kid's $33 for his glasses?
No.
They tell you with kids that, right, you're going to be tested, that they're going to push your buttons, that they're expensive, that your time's going to be taken from you in ways that you didn't expect. But nobody tells you that they're just going to lose shit constantly that you have to replace. I hate that. I hate backtracking. There's many things I hate in life. I hate repeating myself. I hate backtracking, and I hate replacing lost shit.
Yeah, I wonder if there is a conversation to be had for parents, and maybe you can do this with some of your guests, about how you talk to your kids about the value of things, of work, and the role of money, because there seems to be only, one way for most parents to do it. You yell at your kids about money doesn't grow in trees. I work really hard, right, and we don't have the money to replace this. You're going to have to use your own money, and that way the kid learns the value of things. That makes sense. I just don't actually think it works. And listeners might say, worked for me, and I'd be happy to. But my dad did that kind of stuff with us all the time. And it didn't resonate so much, I don't think.
No, not at all. I remember my mother's read Reader's Digest or something. And she said, this is from Reader's Digest. The 4 most important words you're supposed to say to your kids. We can't afford it. And I was just like, whatever.
I think that's I think that's fine. But my dad said to me, one of the things that my dad said to me that made a difference was when I wanted to buy some new sneakers and I had gotten a part-time job, he just looked at me and was like, I always would just look at a thing and be like, how many hours work is that going to cost me? Do I want it that bad? Yeah. And that resonated with me, but I don't think that it resonates with a child who isn't earning a wage yet. The best way to learn the value of money is to actually go and work and get paid. But Ophira, I just hate money. I hate everything that it controls about our choices, and I almost don't want to put that on my kids.
Agree. I totally agree, and it controls so much of my life. It controls so much of my life.
Everybody.
I do. I also just want to opt out. I'm like, how can I? Where can I go? One of the most American questions I've ever heard. Everyone always wants to come to America, and then I find as soon as everyone's here, all they talk about is where can they go. Like there's some safe fucking town that we have that we don't talk about in top 10 lists that is just waiting for them.
Serious question. Growing up in Australia, I do think that Australia and Canada or any other nation. Well, it's same in that you have healthcare that you get through your taxes. And true. I think that controls a lot of adults, especially parents, choices about their career, because you have to choose a job that can cover your child, your family with insurance. And I feel like in Canada that you're less restrained in many ways in terms of your career, much less the company you're going to work at. Well, I better, go work at some shitty company as opposed to going out on my own, because in America,
100%. And I actually, I got in a argument with I guess it's like, how all the medical offices have been bought by these large groups.
Yeah.
Like you think you're going to this practice, but they're like, you're going to get an invoice from Northfield Industries, like some huge conglomerate that they're all under.
Yeah.
Very weird.
Yeah. It is weird when I called for my annual physical and I got an answering service, which is okay, I guess, but you don't even answer to make your own appointments anymore. Doctor's office. Okay, fine. But this service also had access to my medical records. And I'm not like a privacy guy, and I certainly don't need medical. But I wanted to know the thing about my last physical. They had prescribed me vitamin D, and was I supposed to refill that prescription? And they had it all, and they weren't even in my doctor's office. I was like, you're in another state, and you have my medical Could I please talk to the doctor or even a nurse practitioner? No offense to nurses, that was in the office that has access to but I don't know. It's all about efficiencies and profits.
I know. And actually, I went to my dermatologist to get skin checks, as I always do, because I'm full of freckles and moles. And when I left, I think they were just confused the person checked me out, said, "Oh, and do you want to download our app to start gaining points?"
No.
And I was like,
wait, what? Points for at your physician's office for what? What do you get?
So okay, it's because it's a dermatology office, and I guess they are partnered with someone. So if you are coming for cosmetic stuff, I guess you can be part of a point system. I don't know exactly, but I was just like, but I came for a skin check, and she was like, "Oh, yeah, we don't give points for that." I was like, actually, you should give points for that.
What kind of cosmetic stuff are they doing at a dermatologist? Removing a spot or something?
No, like Botox and all that.
They do that at the whatever. That's hilarious. Points for the doctors, like an incentive to. That's the thing about healthcare. It doesn't work like most markets in that you don't want it. You don't want to go to the doctor and get a mammogram or a colonoscopy. You're not looking for it. You do it because you have to live. But it's like there's no incentive to go. Who wants to? That's why some people, especially men, I think, neglect their health. It's just like you don't want to do it. We're not good at making those appointments.
So I'm just going to be vulnerable with you. I'm going to be talking boobs with you for 2 seconds. Okay. It's, you know what? It's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So there you go. So I went to get a mammogram a couple of months ago. And then it's covered, of course. I mean, of course it is. Annual mammogram is covered for women, but I have something called, think this sounds like a good thing, but it works against you. Dense breast tissue. Now you feel like you could almost call.
You said dense, not dance.
Dense.
Ophira, looks like you got a pair of dance breasts. What?
No, floppy breasts, I guess, would be dance breasts. I have dense breasts. They just
I've heard that dense. Your breast tissue is dense. Got it.
It's dense. So when they do that, they like to also do a sonogram because it basically gets rid of all the other like they just feel like they've done all the searching they can. So I agreed to it. It all worked out okay. Thank God. But the mammogram is taken care of by your insurance annual because it's considered preventative, but the sonogram is considered diagnostic. And I was saying to this woman that I was talking to, a very nice woman at this huge health conglomerate that deals with my bill, I'm being charged. Would you consider dense breast tissue a illness or a condition? Because as far as I know, it is just part of my body and many women's bodies. And that's why we do this other test. And therefore, it should be considered also preventative, not diagnostic. Unless you want to tell me dense breast tissue is a condition. Like the only way I could get it written off is if I had floppy breasts. Seems unfair.
It does seem unfair. What also seems unfair is that you think that a floppy breast is not capable of also being considered dense. I don't think that's true. I think that the size, shape, or feeling of the breast. I think that the tissue. I don't know what I'm talking about, but you seem very anti a certain type of breast. I also think it's weird that like we have to say, I'm going to get personal with you. I'm going to talk about my breasts. I'm going to talk about some issue I had with my urinary tract, my vagina, my digestive system, as opposed to if I said that I had like an issue with my hand or my heart. You know, it's like one thing's more personal than the other, and it shouldn't be. It probably shouldn't be, but it is, I guess, for whatever reason.
It is because we live. You know, it's this Christian society we live in.
I know, but like just the one of those
cover
things,
up everybody.
The things that we both have are breasts and nipples, and why is talk about them too much different? Especially since women have like serious health risks as a result of. Not that men can't get breast cancer, as you are a breast cancer survivor. I'm not explaining to you, but it's weird that those things have to be. What I'm saying is, ladies, take off your tops. Why are we all covering?
Show us your dense breasts. I will say though that the woman that I talked to was great, and she was laughing, and she was like, "Yeah, it's not a condition. Dense breasts. It's something that you want. It's like something that women would like to have." Okay. She was just joking around, but I really appreciated it. And I was like, so what happens? She goes, I make notes, I send it to him, and then they let me know the reaction. And I go, well, how am I going to know? And she said, oh, I'll call you. And then she just went, I gotcha. And I was it's like, how rare is it to have that kind of conversation with someone?
That kind of person that she says, I got you, I would 100% believe and trust her if someone says it, especially the way you said it. Maybe she didn't say it the way you just said it to me.
She did. She really made me feel got.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. And I don't know if it's unique or not, but
We'll see, though, because, of course, they're just going to kick it back and be like, nope, send us the money.
Let me just ask you one more thing about money, which is, here's my new thing that we should all ask ourselves, especially at a certain age, maybe, I don't know, or any age.
Okay. If
you could have the perfect work-life balance, how would you spend your days or weeks? What would you change? Like if you could say there's an amount of income that my family needs or that I need to earn that would make me comfortable or even more than comfortable in terms of I'd be able to save for my retirement and stuff like that, if you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. What would you do differently? Because we talked about moments ago about how much money controls us. And as freelancers, if you will, so that people can relate, to not doing comedy and the choices that we make, the kinds of, I think people know we've talked enough, but you don't have to be a comedian or entertainment to know the different ways that we can earn money. But we end up doing things and working with people that we don't necessarily want to do, or even go places. Some guys don't want to go away from their family. You don't want to necessarily leave for this amount of money, but you'd leave for that amount of money. All those kinds of things.
Right.
What would you do if money wasn't the thing? Have you thought about, and outside of the work, what you might spend more time doing, including like cooking or exercising or hanging out with people? Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I would just never have those days where I was like, God, I didn't have the time to exercise. Like I would never have those days because I do feel it's like super useful. But also I love writing. I think my favorite thing is sort of like the personal essay kind of thing, but I also like obviously writing stand-up and such. And that takes time. Like when you do it right, you've blocked up 2 uninterrupted hours that nothing else has. And it's usually, you're not getting paid for those hours. And that's hard. I like working though. I would just do a 4-day work week. Like it would be absolutely 3 days of no work obligations.
Love it. I love all of that. Nothing.
This is it. I'm doing it. You guys catch up.
I would definitely put a limit on, and I like the idea of like a 4-day work week or a certain amount of hours. That's where I would start. But yeah, I mean, I would, when I lost the gig at Sirius, I was doing all these kind of different, like reading different things and trying to think differently and trying to have no limits on what am I going to do next. And it kept coming to me that I love my work. I always have, but I said many times, and I feel very fortunate that I lived all my dreams. Before my age 45, I succeeded in ways I never thought I would succeed. And so I literally was like, I could be done. I feel so, especially the outpouring after when I, on my last show day and the weeks after, the things that people told me, the way I had, you knew this too. I'm sure you had a very similar experience after NPR ended. And I felt very satisfied in terms of what I'd done to help other people in their lives. And I still hear that with the podcast. It's the most rewarding thing in the world. But I kind of was like, I could, if there were a way for me to go ride a horse in the woods, like a park ranger or something, like the answer is I'd be in nature like a lot most of the time, and probably building things. I like to do that now. I'm not good at it, but like building spaces or even like furniture or
you
woodworking.
Are good at it. I saw the building that you did in your garden with all those like you did like vegetable boxes.
That's very rudimentary, and it's even that's not like symmetrical. The point being, I'm not good at it, but I like doing it, and I've gotten a lot better at it. But like my answer is being in nature. I would be out a lot more. I'd be skiing. I'd be in the woods and the lake.
It's funny, I kept again in Vegas. I was just like, how do I go hiking? It was very hard to go hiking, but I was just like, oh, I think because I love nature too, and I feel like I don't have enough of it, I am always yearning for it.
Yeah.
So maybe I would like a more rural environment. Maybe I'll come. You're like not in a rural environment, but you have some landscape.
You don't want to come up here.
Okay, got it. For the ticks this time of year, ticks going down.
You don't want to come to my place. We've been talking about it forever, but it would be fun to have you and your family here anytime you want, and you're always welcome here. And yeah, it's suburbs though, but it's close to all kinds of parks, and I live behind a park, and I'm in it every day, and I am always like, I wish I were here more. Always.
Yeah.
But got to go back to work. Got to go back to and I love my work.
Got to go back to work,
but it's a lot.
You know what? And I love I love creating. I do feel like post-pandemic, the desire for people to meet, and I did that in air quotes, on Zoom has increased by a millionfold, and it is a time suck.
You're saying that the fact that people would prefer to meet virtually is increased, and those meetings take up more time?
Yeah, and I feel like the frequency, like just even, I think that people, just the idea that they're like, I know, we'll just meet on Zoom. It's more of just a reality. So more of those happen. And sometimes those things, we've gone backwards. Like it's sort of like, oh, maybe that could have been an email. Maybe that could have been a quick phone call. Maybe that could have been like, we get together in person even once instead of 17 Zooms. Like, I don't know. There's just like a knee-jerk reaction to like, let's have a Zoom.
I feel like this conversation that we're having right now should have been emails.
It's a chat. We're just in a chat. We're in a chat room.
My show is just, you go read my email exchange with my guest, me and Ophira. This is what we said to each other via email. Yeah, that's not fun. That would be, I don't think anybody would give a shit.
No. Oh, man. There's nothing I like more than deleting emails.
I think you're right about that. I'm not sure that I've had that experience as much, but I also think that like actual meeting in person, it means you gotta get in do a commute, and that takes up time.
Yeah,
which I hate. Hate the commute. At least if I'm driving, definitely, which I almost always have to. Well, I'm very excited for the new podcast. I'll let you go.
Thank you.
Sorry that Christian didn't join us. Actually, I'm really not. I like to be with just you.
I like to be just with you too. I got to say, I miss him. He'll be back, but it's nice talking to you about the parenting stuff since the podcast is launching. So I appreciate that.
And that motherfucker doesn't have any kids.
No, lucky. That's why he always seems so like, I'm going to be here at this time and I'm going to be there at that time. He's just fancy free flying around.
It's interesting. I wonder if with your new podcast, how often you will talk about, people without kids and all of that.
Yeah, often. I hope in a way that's, I wanted to do this thing as part of it where we just did a waterfall of different voices of people talking about all the things they get to do because they didn't have kids, just as a little, because I think parenting podcasts in a way could be very like, look at us, we're doing the hard work. No one appreciates the hard work that is to parent, which is true. But it's also good to just hear what someone say, like, I wake up at 10. Sometimes I do spontaneous travel, like just... like that to remind
it is it I mean I just one thing about that, which is you'll realize, you'll see this when your son's older, but like my daughters are 14 and 17 now, and so you're an active parent with a lot of responsibilities if your kids don't have any special needs, at least and if you did a good job as a parenting until a certain age, and like now I'm just an accessory.
Right. You're driving them around when they
barely. My other daughter has her license, so she drives her sister to school. Like I just don't have a lot to do, so I have more time. I'm still a parent. My kids are still living at home, but they're in high school. So what I'm saying is, as your kids get older, there are, at least in our case, I don't want to speak for everybody, there are a lot less responsibilities. Thus, you have more time, and that's usually pretty good. I mean, I wish they would hang out with me more, to be honest with you, but that's not done by design. I want them to flap their wings. That was the whole deal. Bye-bye.
When their birthday comes up, I mean, like 14, that must have been that's a big birthday. 16, that's classically a very big birthday. Did you plan it? Are you planning birthdays or what goes on?
Parties and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I keep saying Julia's 14. She just turned 15.
Oh, okay.
And there was a goddamn birthday week. It seemed to cost us a lot. There was a lot of events that occurred. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we didn't plan. I mean, I don't know how other people's kids are, but like they plan their birthdays pretty well. Birthdays are a big deal.
Here's what we're doing.
Val has always made birthdays a big deal, a big occasion, and so they do too. And yeah, there's a whole plan. There's an agenda. It's a birthday week. This is filled with many celebrations and lots of different dinners and money expenditures.
Did you have birthday week growing up?
No, my birthday. First of all,
one day.
My birthday's on Halloween.
Oh, that's right. It's coming up.
So as you know, I mean, you've heard me do this, but no one cared about my birthday.
Yeah.
It was Halloween. And in the end, it was pretty great because I got toys and candy on the same day. It was.
That's true. Are you going as Han Solo this year?
Why do you say that?
I don't know. Because I figured you would.
Again. Yes. Do you know that I made friends with a kid because Star Wars was so big when we were, and I was in high school, or rather kindergarten, maybe like 79 when Star Wars came out, or around the time Star Wars came out. And I walked up to a kid the first day of kindergarten, and I think I've done this my whole life since because it worked that one time. He had a pinstripe on his pants, stripe down his pants, and I thought that, and Han Solo did, on his pants. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world that this kid had a stripe on his pants. It's the only thing I knew about him. And I walked up to him and I said, "Hello, my name is Pete. Would you be my friend?" And he's like, "Yes." I go, "What's your name?" He's like, "Justin." I was like, "Okay, we're friends." I've been doing that since then.
Yes.
Will you be my friend?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I do. I definitely, when I moved to New York, I would literally go up to women. I'd be like, "Do you want to go for coffee with me?" And they'd be like, "Okay." I'd be like, "Okay, see you on Tuesday."
Complete strangers?
You were like just people that were like, I'd be at a comedy show and it would be like someone's friend's friend or whatever. And I'd be like, I don't know, they seem cool. And I would just like literally make them go for coffee with me.
I think you're still like that. And it's one of my favorite things about you. It doesn't, that is, I mean, like you would have definitely gone on. I knew that when I didn't even ask you if I could share your number with Cassie and listeners. Cause I was like, she's not going to be mad. Like, what is she going to be? They're not going to do anything. She's not going to be mad. She'd love to hang out with these people who I'm vouching for.
And
of course.
Cassie has an amazing pool. I'm not trying to advertise where you live, Cassie, but you have a really beautiful looking pool. I would have gone and hung out by that pool.
Yeah. We've seen her
next time
at our hangouts. We've seen her pool. We've seen her Tesla. I want to.
Oh. Yeah. Oh,
good person. Good person to be close to.
Yeah, but she didn't know about the bookstore, so I got to teach Cassie something about Vegas.
That's interesting. Wow. I'm going to have to make fun of her for that. Ophira, as always, a great conversation. I hope that people will go check out the new podcast. And you can also call. There's a number, and I'll link to it, 802-234-1407. Tell us your parenting stories or email them and leave a voice memo or whatever. A lot of different ways to do that. And then you get to, I'm definitely going to do that. I'm going to leave.
Yeah, just a slice of your day. I had some very funny ones. People come in just talking about birthdays or fall. Or
can I call and leave that one? The one I just told you about, Julia? That's good fodder.
Please do. That's perfect.
Great.
Yeah.
You can.
You will give you credit, or you can be anonymous. People, it's up to you.
I just want to plug my podcast. I'll be like, my daughter and I. Anyway, listen to my show. Parenting.
Pete will be on the show. Everybody, Pete will be on Parenting is a Joke.
After you go through every comedian with a bigger, more influential following, then I will join you. When you're really, can I just be your cancel guest? Like when Amy Schumer cancels, you can call me. I don't know why I said Amy Schumer.
Sure.
She a parent?
Whatever.
Yeah, she has kids, right? Ophira, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, there she goes, everybody. Ophira Eisenberg. And you should go listen to that new podcast, Parenting is a Joke. Go subscribe. Go support Ophira. Let her know that you heard her on the show, and we always love it. I love talking to her. I hope you enjoyed that. But now it's time for something different, something special. When a listener, Matt Carlson, who I've got to know really well, become good friends with, reached out to me. He's been helping me a lot on the podcast, promoting it and producing it along with Dr. Barry Hummel, Tina Winsett, and others. But so when Matt reached out to me and said, hey, man, I'd love to have a conversation with Christian Finnegan. And he's got good interview chops. He's a smart guy, knows a lot about music, being a musician and in 2 bands himself. I said, you know what, give it a shot and I'll listen to it. And if it's good, if I like it, I'll put it on the podcast. And so if other people have ideas like this, send them my way. standupwithpete@gmail.com. Matt's Twitter bio, by the way, reads like this: proud Michigander, sad bastard music maker, dad, husband, film nerd, coffee snob, cocktail lover, sipper of IPAs. Go to bandcamp.harborcoat.com to learn more about his music and work. He is on Twitter at Wax and Wayne Music. And if you come to our hangouts on Thursday night, Matt is usually there and always funny and contributes a lot to me and the show. So I was very happy to have him do this. And of course, everybody knows Christian Finnegan, hilarious stand-up comedian, joins me regularly here, has several albums, is performing in Washington at the Improv this weekend in D.C., and Matt and Christian talk a lot about music and Christian's newsletter. It's newmusicforolds.substack.com. I love it and I've learned so much, and I learned even more from this conversation. Matt Carlson, Christian Finnegan, welcome to Stand Up and take it away.
You essentially wanted to find something that you enjoyed, that you were good at, and somehow landed at this. What was that path like?
Well, it was the kind of thing where I was just looking at my life, and rather than beating myself up for the things I wasn't doing that I thought I should be doing creatively, I asked myself, well, what is it that I already do? What are the things that I do without anyone asking me to, that I just do for myself? And, you know, after I eliminated the unhealthy answers to that question, what I was left with was I listened to new music, you know, and that's the constant that's sort of never changed. And if anything, during the pandemic, I would say it ramped up a little bit. I mean, obviously some years you're going to be more engaged in discovery than others, depending on what's going on in your life. But obviously with the pandemic, and, you know, there was a lot of time to pour through new release sections. And so I just found that was the one either neutral or positive thing that I was doing that didn't feel like work, that you know, I wasn't beating myself up for, you know, oh God, you know, Christian, you haven't discovered a new song today, or you spent too much. You know what I mean? There was just, there was no weight to it. It was just fun. It was just something I did for fun.
Very low sort of expectations or negative outcomes possible.
Yeah. And I thought that, you know, for a long time, I've had a really insecure relationship to music criticism and whether I deserved to take part in it at all. Because I'm not an expert. Like, I'm really not. Like, every day I'm clued in more and more about how little, you know, I really do know in terms of just facts and, you know.
But I guess in this day and age, not to get into a much deeper conversation, but what the hell's an expert?
I know.
I mean, you're right. Clearly we've destroyed expertise as a novelty anyway. But even then, like, the world has become so siloed that, yeah, you can know everything there is to know about one tiny little subgenre. And I think for some people that's really comforting in the way that, you know, it was comforting for a woman 100 years ago to just, you know, drop her kids off at school and then go to Catholic church every day because that's what felt good, right? It felt comfortable and normal.
Yeah, I mean, the way I always felt about it is that, like, I don't know as much about metal as, like, a real metalhead.
Right.
And I don't know as much about funk as a person who's, like, super into funk music. But I probably know more about metal than the funk fan, and I probably know more about funk than a metal fan. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. I mean, like, it's not this, like, jack of all trades or very, like, thin veneer. Like, there is some depth usually if you want to take the time. But again, it is an investment. And that was one of the things that I really started to think about when I got kind of clued into what you were doing, because you'd mentioned it on Pete's podcast. And I was like, well, this sounds really cool. And one of the things I thought about was, as much as I love music and as much as I spend time around other musicians, anybody in my life who's not a musician, and even some people who are, have kind of just stopped seeking out new music.
Yeah.
You know, is that kind of common in sort of the spheres you run in or the circles that you travel?
Absolutely. I mean, in many ways, my sort of North Star for the newsletter is the conversations I had with my two best friends in high school and college. You know, a lot of our friendship revolved around, hey, have you heard this? And being in the car together and listening to music and having conversations about it. And we still have them. And we, you know, send stuff to each other every now and then. I'm still very good friends with both of them, but they're not really good friends with each other anymore. But that's another story. Wow. But their lives are just such that they don't have time to really spend as much. One of them is my stepbrother, or my former stepbrother. Our parents were married for like 20 years. He's just, you know, he's busy. He's got a job. He's got a life. He's, you know, and he still loves music. I mean, he went to Full Sail, which is like a music production college in Florida, and he worked in music, you know, in recording studios for years. But he builds his own guitars. Like, he's a music guy. But it's just so easy to get sort of, you know, like you were saying, siloed, especially now with algorithms being what they are. They will just feed you what you've already heard as long as you can stand it. You know, I mean, it'll
and the other thing
drill
too
down whatever your taste
that
is.
I feel like I struggle with as somebody who kind of has fits and starts with going on little voyages of discovery. One of the things I struggle with is that within, say, Apple Music, which is my streamer of choice, there's not really a lot of hey, here's what's in your collection that's kind of similar to maybe this other thing that you were listening to, but you haven't listened to it in X amount of months. Some sort of weird algorithm to almost be like, kind of, you're sort of floating along a set of virtual shelves and somebody goes, hey, remember this record? Because you don't.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice to have somebody jog your memory about it and you go, I haven't listened to that since 1997. That might be fun.
Yeah, and there's some real joy there. And I think what I'm trying to drill down on and what I always try to think of, like, well, what is the value added? Like, what can I sort of bring that going on Pitchfork or Consequence of Sound or any number of music sites can't do? To me, it's just, first of all, that I'm a comedian, so hopefully there's a sense of humor there. But also, I'm not interested in what is popular or unpopular. Like, I really don't care. Like, I've said something a couple times in the newsletter, not to quote myself because it's not a very intelligent quote, but that just that music is what happens between your ears and everything else is culture. And there's nothing wrong with culture. You know, rock and roll is 50% music, 50% culture. What people forget sometimes is just the joy of having a new song in your life. Just the simple pleasure of having a song that you're into, that it'll last 3 days, maybe it'll last 2 weeks. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with listening to the music you've always loved. I mean, you know, I'll put on Spirit of Radio by Rush, you know, once a month, just because I love it. But there's a different kind of joy in just finding a new song, just something new. And one of the upsides of the world we live in now is that it's all findable. Like, you can just dig in and just start clicking shit. Like, you don't have to care about, like, what's top of the charts or what are the tastemakers saying? It's like, just go to a new release section, pick a genre and just click on something.
And if you want to get really, really weird, like, go, okay, I live in Madison, Wisconsin. What do the hip hop acts in Madison, Wisconsin sound like? I have no idea.
Yeah,
and I mean, just like,
this might not be fun for everybody,
there,
but
and kind of work your way down the whole, like, oh, poor phrasing, I apologize, but like you know, kind of go on the adventure. Like, let it take you someplace. Like, if the algorithm's going to do weird shit, you know, if it can radicalize you and make you believe that QAnon's a thing, then I guess it can also send you down a path where, like, you might learn about, like, ambient music that you didn't know before.
Right.
Right. At least give us that.
And this isn't something that not everybody wants that. Not everybody misses that experience. It's music. Everybody loves music when they're a kid, just because it's kind of part of growing up, like the cool new song or whatever. But not everybody truly needs music to be a part of their lives.
No.
And that's not a positive or negative thing. It's just, you know, some people need sports in their lives. Some people don't. Some people need music. Some people don't. So if you are that kind of person, it can be a really fun way to spend, you know, an hour of your week of just sort of listening to stuff.
Sure.
And so what I've tried to do is just, since this is something I do anyway, is just like, here's what I've found. Here's some stuff that I think is really cool. And maybe you'll like one of the 3 things I post, and maybe you won't, but maybe it'll inspire you to start digging around on your own. Like, I don't have any sort of, you know, ego when it comes to this. It's like,
So what is it when you kind of sit down and I mean, even before the newsletter was a thing, like, when you would kind of, you know, maybe sit down and be in a mood to do that for an hour or two? Do you start with keywords? Do you just, like, start with an artist you like and then kind of build out from there? Where does it begin?
It depends. I mean, I've become much more overt about it since doing the newsletter. I have to be much more active in my approach to it. First of all, because I'm like, I've kind of had this pressure now to find new stuff, whereas before I could kind of just listen to something till I got bored of it and then find something else. But I mean, you know, I always check the new release section I use Apple Music as well, and I'll go to the alternative section, I'll go to the hard rock section, I'll go to the R&B section, I'll go to the metal section and whatever, and I'll just start clicking around and seeing until something kind of piques my interest. And then every once in a while, especially when I'm doing for the people who pay for the newsletter, a mighty but small group, I do newsletters in the off week where I do kind of a little bit more dumpster diving, or sort of historical dumpster diving, where I'll be like, French rap. What's that like? Or, First Nations music, Australian First Nations music.
I'm going to stop you there. That's because we're just going to flow. Have you heard the Native North America set that Light in the Attic put out a few years ago? It's called Native North America, and the West Coast label Light in the Attic did it. Mm-mm. And it is stunning. I don't know if you do physical media or just digital, but it is all First Nations people, mostly Canadian, and it's everything from folk to country to kind of like blues rock. It's to traditional stuff. It's basically,
what's the name of the compilation?
It's called Native North America Volume 1.
See, that's the kind of thing. It's like I come to that with zero preconceived notions at all.
Right. And then like you hear one song, and if you didn't know that, and if you didn't know the context of it, you probably wouldn't be interested in pay attention, or I might be less interested. The narrative of that is really intriguing to me. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'd like to hear something I've never heard before. That somebody that's almost like a museum piece. And then like it just becomes a song that's in your life, and it ceases to be this thing that's sort of like this antique, and then it just becomes this living, breathing thing within your day-to-day existence. And that seems kind of magical to me.
I remember once I used to do a music podcast that it was too much labor, and I'm not good enough with tech. It was called Audio Spackle, and it was basically where I would interview people about, soundtracking their lives in various ways. And the first episode I did was with Mike Doty from the band Soul Coughing, and who's just a real peach of a dude. And at the time was living in New York City and kind of hung around a lot of the comedy people in New York. And so he was very nice enough to do my podcast. And we were talking about jazz, and I was saying how, there's some kind of jazz that I really enjoy, but when it comes to like bebop and like a lot of real notey, NOTE-Y jazz, really manic, sort of complicated, it just, I don't have a foothold. Like I can't find an in. And his response to it is to stop trying to figure out and just enjoy the weird sounds. Just enjoy the bleeps and the bloops, and just laugh at it almost. That just find it interesting. And I thought that was a really
what he's saying is almost look at it more with a childlike view.
Yeah, exactly. As if you've never heard music before.
Right, so it's all just exciting.
You don't need necessarily you don't need to sort of put it into a mental part of your brain of like, this equals that. And,
I remember I took I'm going to really out myself as an intellectual here. I took a community college film class when I was 19 years old in the great city of Lansing, Michigan. So rarefied air, I know.
Speaking to an auteur.
And the first thing my prof said to me was, if I do my job at the end of the semester, I will have changed the way that you watch movies. And there will be times when you curse me for that. And he was absolutely correct. And I am one of those assholes who can every so often sit back and just enjoy a sort of a stupid film, but like sometimes it's really hard not to put the cynic hat on, to go, oh, that seemed manipulative, or that seems showy, or like, this could have been 41 minutes shorter, that bullshit, as opposed to just like have some popcorn and shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I mean, some of that comes with age as well, but yeah, I mean, I have that trouble with comedy a lot. I don't watch a lot of comedy because not only do I have those, seeing the wheels turning and sort of breaking it into its component parts, I also have I know that guy. We used to do open mics together, or what's he, why aren't I doing, like all that sort of added baggage.
Oh yeah, the same sort of uncomfortable bullshit and tension you deal with in every business, and then it's just amplified by the fact that your business is who you are as a person.
Yeah, and I think that's also one of the appealing things about sort of spending a lot of time thinking about music and writing music is I don't do it. It's not what I do, and so I don't have any baggage there. I don't have any ego when it comes to it, when just appreciating music, because I'm not. And I think that's not only a rock critic. I'm not trying to do
unique, but also a super valid viewpoint of like sort of like the very engaged audience member. sort of not even necessarily curating. Like one of the things I thought about when I sort of got the rhythms of what you were doing in the newsletter was I thought about a point in my, like an actual moment in my life where I went to like a week-long thing done by the American Legion called Boys State that was like this sort of like political symposium for high school nerds. We all got together in the dorms at Michigan State University, and we had like mock elections, and I worked on the fake newspaper. We put a newspaper out at the end of the week. And by like the third day, you just show up at the place, and this guy stops me and he goes, "Hey man, I wanted to ask you, are you the guy with the tapes?" And I went, "What?" And he goes, "The tapes. Are you the dude that brought the tapes everybody was listening to last night?" And I was indeed the guy who brought like the little thing that you carry in your car,
Mm-hmm.
And
like
yeah. And the little 30 thing. And he was like, "Hey, bring those in here." And so I just became the guy with the tapes. So what I wanted to know was like, what was the moment where like you were the guy, like not just with your two friends, but with other people, where you were like, "Oh, have Christian make you a mix." Like, did that happen?
Only privately. I mean, a lot of people don't necessarily know that about me. It's not something I don't know. It's funny that you bring this up because I'm writing a newsletter for tomorrow, and I'm writing this long piece that I'm breaking up into 3 because it's just too long, about me going on a VH1 game show in 2001 called Name That Video. And that was probably that actually in many ways led to my basic cable years in a certain way. I was on this game show, and so I kind of was known. I was just an open mic comic. I didn't really have any cred as a stand-up yet, but I went on this game show, and a couple people sort of found out that I knew a lot about MTV and music and stuff like that. And they had this new show they were doing called I Love the 80s. And they were doing what they call an internal pilot, which is just where they make a TV show for the executives, like it doesn't air, and like a test pilot, essentially. And so they brought in a bunch of nobodies like me to kind of, make jokes about Twisted Sister or whatever. And then they're like, "We love this show. Now let's get rid of all those nobodies and get sort of somebodies." And so when they actually had I Love the 80s, they had people like, Michael Ian Black or Kenny Mayne, like people who are kind of at least second tier celebrities, But then a couple years later, when they decided to do Best Week Ever, they had remembered me from I Love the 80s. And so that's kind of how I got into that show. It, ironically, I don't know if irony is the right word, but I didn't know anything or give two shits about most of the stuff we talked about on Best Week Ever. It's not that I had anything against it. It's just like I didn't even have a TV at the time. Like I really was not aware of sort of current pop culture stuff, like Page Sixy, gossip rag type stuff. But because I had been on I Love the 80s and the test pilot, that's how I kind of wormed my way into that. So I guess in some ways, my musical knowledge made me some money, I guess, not a ton because it's VH1,
right? But it was at least, it's nice when your nerdery takes you to a place that that winds up being good for a while.
Yes, yes, and I certainly like amongst my friends and like girlfriends, I would make, I was king of the mix.
Oh God,
it was. Yeah, I had a whole thing. It was a big deal, and it's sad
honestly, was it boilerplate though? Like, did you have no? But like, did you get like stayed where you were like, okay, the side's always going to open and close with boom.
Wait, so
what? You get stuck, and then you wind up, and you've always got the same side opener and the same side closer, and then it's like, well, I'll just fill in the middle.
Well, to a degree, perhaps. I did try to cater to the person I was making a mix CD for, and track order has always been very important to me. Even though I've never been the kind of guy who uses lyrics as like a sort of passive aggressive. I've never used a mixtape to say something to someone. It's always 100% about here's some songs that I might like, and I hate to keep going back to High Fidelity as sort of, the Bible of sort of aging music geeks, but it is. And I think he says, I don't know if it's in the movie or if it's in the book, but he says it's not what you're like, it's what you like.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
I mean, sometimes that works to a detriment, right? I mean, you talk about that nearly every Friday with Ophira and Pete, you know,
Yeah.
but you do have, like, you can kind of find your people that way. You can find like-minded folks.
The person I spend the most time in the world with is my wife, and we have some musical language in common. Like, we're both into like a lot of 80s hair metal. And so when we're in the car together, it's always, you know, Slayer or, you know, Ozzy's Boneyard or Sirius Hair Nation or whatever. And, but you know, that's not like I don't have to have that with someone, but it's like, it's nice to be able to share those passions with people, even if they're not your wife or girlfriend or.
Oh, for sure. And you don't want them to overlap, you know, completely. You just want there to be enough.
No, I agree.
Kind of, I don't know. I was going to try to make a quilt metaphor and realized that I was completely out of my depth. So now you and your wife, you said you don't share a ton of musical overlap. Do you share stuff with her? And what is that dynamic like? Does she share stuff with you?
I do. I mean, she reads the newsletter and she certainly likes some of it. But this kind of what I mean is that, like, my wife loves music, but she doesn't need music the way I do. You know what I mean? It's just a lot of her musical enjoyment is cultural, you know, is stuff she grew up with and sort of a certain attitude that she reminds her of being a
or
kid,
gives off that,
you know?
like, time machine vibe. You know, where like you can find a moment or a place.
But even she, like, you know, when she loves this Icelandic guy, Dodi Freyr, who was a dude who won Eurovision one year. Okay, I think
this is bound to be.
It was during the year where
this is going to be great.
I think it was the year that during the pandemic, so they didn't actually get to perform. Like, they won technically, but they didn't actually get to perform. But she super got into this guy. I mean, it's a band / a guy, but she loves it. And the difference between her and me is that when she loves a new song, she will run it into the fucking ground. It's her morning alarm to, like, take her cancer medication in the morning. And so I hear this fucking song every day for the last 3 years. I've heard this song. And to me, it means nothing now. Like, it's not that I don't like it. I liked it originally. We went to see this guy live. It was a great show. But that song to me is completely drained of anything other than annoyance at this point. But for her, she just, every day she's like, I love this song.
I'm kind of amazed that you can do that for that long.
Yeah. I mean, maybe if, you know, I need a new buzz. I can't just listen.
And
to
like, I will, I found this thing recently, this Dutch pop band, called the Maureen's. I found out about this somewhere out of nowhere, and they have this song, called, 20 Years for the Company. And like, I had that song on repeat and I would listen to it 3 times a day. And I did that for like 2 weeks. That's a long time for me. You know, and then it's like, okay, on to something else, you know? Time. And then I like saw it again maybe 3 months later. And I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And
then it just kind of becomes, it recedes into your life, but it's still there for when you want it, but it doesn't have to be in the pole position.
It doesn't need to be, and it's kind of funny. I kind of, in a way, and I'm sure I'm just nostalgic for a different time in my life, I sort of miss kind of those moments of ubiquity you couldn't avoid. You know, so like,
I mean, sort of the mass culture stuff.
I mean, you know, if you were alive in 1983 and sucking air, you knew about Thriller. You know,
yeah, right. There is no monoculture.
You know, I mean,
anymore, so you know,
and I mean, like, even stuff like, I mean, I know they just did the Super Bowl halftime show at the West Coast Hip Hop thing, and I think Rihanna's doing it this year, and that's kind of sort of the apex of that anymore for us. Is that moment, that 20-minute halftime medley or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I wonder, it's like, is there no monoculture, or are we just too old to know what it is?
And that's
you know
the
what
question.
I mean? Like, that there is a monoculture, but I think the answer is probably some of each. You know, there's probably, if any music I am aware of, probably by definition can't be that cool. And I don't
like. I mean, you and I have shared our affection for Wilco. You know, I think that's a sentiment somewhat explained in The Late Greats. You know, where he's talking about, like, you know, the greatest things out there are the things you haven't heard, the things that haven't even been made yet.
Yeah. And that's, you know, I mean, the downside, you know, obviously, like you're saying, that it is certainly not the case that everyone knows the same 10 songs, you know, at the same time. And that is just something that the cat is out of the bag. The toothpaste is not going back into the tube. That's just the way it is. But the upside of that, you know, rather than be bitter about that or be angry or try to sort of pretend that we can go back to having a thriller again, let's just enjoy this hellscape for what it is and find our joy where we can get it. And where we can get it is that we are at an unending buffet table in front of us that you are at leisure to pick from whenever and whatever you want. You know, that, like we were saying before, it's like you can listen to Native American music if you want to. You can listen to Beyonce if you want to. It's, you know, there's a flattening effect that streaming services have, which is positive in a way. I mean, it's all... Well,
it lowers the bar of entry. So it's one thing to say, okay, you can have somebody like Billie Eilish and her brother, and they can make a record on a laptop in their bedroom, and that's all true. But if we have an old-fashioned gatekeeper and delivery model, that record's just going to stay on a laptop, and maybe it's going to get shared with a few dozen people. You know?
Right.
That's a good thing. What happens then is you have just this glut of mediocrity that kind of gets created. And so it feels to me like there's more haystack and fewer needles.
Right. Yeah, certainly. I would say it's a world of haystacks, but each haystack does have a needle in it somewhere.
And there's a lot of...
If we want to just keep extending this metaphor.
I could be running out of agricultural metaphors altogether, let alone ones that are hay-based.
Well, I was going to say, a lot of times in the old model, what was called a needle in that haystack was really just a record company paying radio stations to call it a needle. You know what I mean? So it's like, think of when I think of all the great music that maybe was written or even recorded in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s that never saw the light of day just because it wasn't able to sort of, you know, make it through the eye of the needle.
Okay, so I mentioned the Native North America thing. There are sort of boutique labels that's all they do now, is they go through and they're basically come in people's basements and attics and storage spaces, and they're trying to find what happened to that soul label that was open for 9 years in Columbus, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, so there are people.
And so, it's just, rather than fight the current of that, take from it what you can, which is that there really is nothing stopping you from just almost playing pin the tail on the donkey and just listening to some music and finding something that you like. Like, I'm not super interested at all in trying to help bands right now. I mean, not that I'm not interested in it, but that's not where my focus is. My focus is more on just people like, hey, here's a great way to get a buzz on a Thursday night. You know,
I also think that there's something to just a device that the idea behind it and the impetus of it is strictly based solely in the idea of pure enjoyment. You know, so much of what we do anymore is you have a tiny little bit of skill or inclination or desire to do something. Here's how you can use that to get a gig economy job. So you could use that to make, you know, X amount of money on YouTube Live or on OnlyFans or whatever the fuck it is you do. You know, so in a way, like, just taking a moment to sit back and go, hey, somebody put this newsletter together and there's this one really sweet song and I really dig it, and maybe I'm going to go listen to this whole record. And if you find a band like, the one that just blew my mind was, like, I listened to that goddamn Totally Enormous Extinct Dinosaurs thing like half a dozen times. Like, I sent it to friends. I was like, this is ridiculous.
It's a perfect little song, you know? Yeah. It's, and that's, again, those are my favorite ones where I literally know nothing. Like, I didn't read about them. Nobody recommended them to me. I literally just was scrolling through the new release section on Apple Music, nothing cool. And I just said, what is that? I picked electronic music just because I don't know a ton about electronic music. And honestly, that barely qualifies. Like when I went to electronic music, I was expecting more like Aphex Twin type stuff or whatever. But I was like, what's this? And I clicked on it, and it's this perfect little synth pop album. And my life is 0.01% better because of it. And
I love knowing that it's in the world. I love knowing that there are kids out there who like, fuck, I love Kraftwerk and Depeche Mode. I want to do something like that, but different.
Yeah.
You know, or they're trying to do the same thing and they can't or don't know how, and so they make something new, which is how most of us find our voice anyway. So I guess to kind of wrap up, as somebody who has ideas pretty regularly that I want to implement, I tend to find that when I have something I'm excited about that I'm doing for the pursuit of pleasure, it can be difficult to sustain after a while when it becomes kind of a burden, because and there's a level of expectation to it that maybe after time can sort of ruin the fun of that. Have you experienced that at all? Are you worried about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's kind of at a bit of a fulcrum right now where I kind of probably need it to get a little bigger to feel like it's a valid use of my time. Because I'm a really slow writer. And there's a lot of just logistical stuff like links and crap like that. And so it takes me more time than I would like. And like that famous quote, like, I sometimes don't know how to write something. I don't have the time to write something short. And so they tend to be a little longer than I want them to be because I just, whatever, my personal issues. And I would love to promote it, but I don't really know how to, because it's sort of aimed at people who aren't easy to reach. You know what I mean? It's aimed at people our age. And I don't want to spend a shit ton of time on social media, and I can't really make it the main focus of my life. And then it does kind of wring it of some of its enjoyment. And so I'm trying to find how to do that. Like, how do I get more people to, and it, of course, obviously money would be great, but even just the feeling that the numbers were continuing to go up ever so slightly, and they are, but it's just at a trickle. I had a really nice first couple months of people signing up, but I don't do any real promotion for it. And so it's the kind of thing where I'm going to keep doing it for at least a year, just because I told myself that's what I was going to do. But, my wife occasionally looks at me askance when she sees how much time I'm spending on this thing that really doesn't bring in anything, discernible. And so, I'm trying to find that medium now, but I'm super enjoying doing it. And I love the fact that I don't have to ask anybody's permission. It's just my thing. And so I have no plan on leaving it anytime soon, but hopefully we can make it grow just ever so slightly.
That's why we're going to keep talking about it. That's what we'll do.
Thanks,
Christian, I could go on and on about this. I literally made a list. Just by the way, the only thing I'll leave you with is, I think I spent 3 days thinking about that Toya track, trying to figure out what the fuck did I just hear? What was the note? Let me look at the note I wrote down.
Thunder in the Mountains.
That's the thing. Like, the first thing I thought was, okay, how is this not on the Lost Boys soundtrack? Because clearly that was perfect for that.
Yeah, for people who are listening, Toya Wilcox is a British, kind of a Dollar General Kate Bush sort of, who now, if you know her much, I mean, she's kind of a big celebrity in the UK, but if you know her now, it's mostly because her and her husband, Robert Fripp, who from King Crimson, do these weird little breakfast videos where she gets sort of naked and they play pop songs, and they're both in their solid,
and they're utterly 60s. Charming, but
they're very charming. They're very charming.
So playful about it.
And it's absurd, and I love it.
It's amazing. Christian, thanks so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it, Matt.
Well, there you have it. A special interview conducted by a listener with our regular guest, Christian Finnegan, and Matt is excited to launch his own thing potentially. He's got a great idea, and I'm really excited to do whatever I can to promote him and other creative, amazing things that listeners are doing. So reach out to me if you want help. Stand Up with Pete gmail.com. That's all I've got for you today. If you're listening on Friday, I hope you have a great weekend. Whenever you're listening, I thank you for listening. Please support the show with a paid subscription. Go to standupwithpete.com or patreon.com/Pete Dominic right now. Check out our sponsor this week, indeed.com/standup. And I will talk to you next week. Be the change you want to see in the world. Love you guys. John Carroll, give it to me good.
Knees, you gotta stand up, stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up, that's right. You got to rise up, you got to stand up. Stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. This is the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. While you lying awake wondering where the money all went, it'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it than now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.